It was really cool to go shoulder to shoulder, face to face with my wife, doing something that matters and was meaningful. All of them are meant to serve each other, right? So your physical life serves your mental life. It serves your family life. It serves your spiritual life. Your spiritual life serves your physical life. I've got databases on, the 8 parts of life. I can then go in and I can tag with people, right? I can go and tag people who I think are experts at their physical life, who are experts at their mental life, who are experts at their family life.
I care enough about you as a human being to put in a system so that I can organize how I interact with you and serve you better.
There's clarity in the volume as well, that you just don't know what you don't know until you start doing, right?
Welcome to the Exceptional Companies Podcast, a podcast for purpose-led entrepreneurs looking to master the art of buying, selling, or optimizing small businesses. Your host, Chris Seegers, founder of Exceptional Companies and author of Selling Main Street, has over a decade of experience starting, buying, and leading successful businesses. He's here to guide you through the complex world of business transactions and growth. Each week, we dive deep with actionable insights, expert interviews, and real-world strategies to activate and equip you to live exceptionally and build exceptional businesses. Now, let's dive into today's episode. Here's your host, Chris Seegers.
Welcome to the Exceptional Companies Podcast, where we discuss how to buy, sell, or grow your business. I'm joined today by a very good friend and guest, Joseph Thompson. Joseph, welcome to the show, brother.
Thanks, man. Happy to be here. Humbled. It's an honor. Love the pod.
It's going to be a blast, man. So for our listeners and viewers, we recorded this whole thing a couple weeks ago, and then for some reason the technology on my end failed and it wouldn't process it correctly. So anyways, we're back for round 2. It's going to be even better. Joseph, I want to just kind of give a little bit of kudos and introduce you. You are one of the best thinkers I've ever met. Every time we have a call, you're always trying to optimize different areas of your life, spiritually, with your family, in business. And so I've always admired you. You've been a great friend. And I'm excited to dig into the story behind how you got where you are. And then we really dug into some really incredible things in regards to having a second brain for your personal and professional life, taking more shots on goal, and really just kind of expediting and building that bridge as you go across it. But for the sake of our audience, tell us a little bit about your background and your story and maybe how we met and fast forward to today.
Yeah, I love it. So I'll take a couple minutes here. So I grew up, both my parents are W-2 employees, and I grew up in a home where you go to school and you get if you get good grades, then you can go to a good college school and you can get a good job and you kind of move through life that way. And then you have kids and you hope that they get good grades and they go to a good school. The
typical societal box.
That's right.
Like the way that everybody tells us to go.
That's right. It's, I did that world and, I'm still in that world and, I've had a couple tastes of the good life with equity and that kind of deal. And so, but, really fast forwarding, graduated through school at A&M, petroleum engineering. And then my wife and I, we took a little break over into Central Europe in Slovakia. We were missionaries over there for about 13 months. And then we moved our family out to Midland so I can use my degree, and God put us together in our path. So that was...
So let's pause there for a second, because I think that's super useful. I had a guest on, Parker Samuelson, who's just amazing.
Yep.
And he did a similar thing where right when they started getting kind of the point of being able to make good money coming out of university, or maybe having a little bit of experience, they said, hey, let's pause and let's travel. Now they traveled and did some different things, but he's a believer as well. So why, instead of just coming out of A&M, I know you did really well in university, had a bunch of job offers with a lot of friends we knew out in the Permian Basin in oil and gas. Why go serve somewhere else instead of just hopping in and getting on the treadmill?
Yeah, I think, you get this idea where, the idea was a crazy idea on the front end, and it was just a matter of just following down that idea. But, hindsight being 2020, one of the biggest kind of value propositions is that I was, 3 or 4 months married, and we were able to put, more hours into our marriage on a daily basis than we do almost today on a weekly basis, right? And it's just one of those where every single day was almost a week of marriage in kind of the everyday normal life where, you spend a couple hours at home and you've got dinner to deal with and putting a kid down and all of those things that kind of, you're juggling. And so it was really cool to go shoulder to shoulder, face to face with my wife, doing something that matters and was meaningful, and really create a foundation for that relationship. And, I don't think I'd be where I am today if we would have jumped straight into, corporate world and done the 8 to 5 or, really 8 to 8, that you've got to cut your teeth the first, 5 years going and doing something like that.
So let's pause there, because I think that leads to that 10,000 hour concept.
Yeah.
And so if you want to have mastery in any of the pillars of your life, your faith, your family, fitness, finances, business, it just takes time, which has always been a frustration for me. Everything that I believe I can accomplish always takes like 2 or 3 times longer than I think it will.
Yeah.
But I've never heard it proposed. And really that's what I heard is, you said, let's accelerate, and maybe intentionally or unintentionally, but let's accelerate the time together in our marriage to get to more of a mastery in marriage. Now, marriage is a tough thing every day, no matter how long you've been married, but you got more reps in the front end of your marriage than just going to work, seeing your spouse for an hour, watching Netflix for 2 hours, going to bed, having some weekend time. How has that influenced your marriage and just how you see life? Because that's probably had a pretty big impact.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, it's the reps, and then it's the reps with the right goal, right? Not every rep is considered equal or kind of it fits inside that mental model equally. And so you get reps on things that matter when you're serving together and you're, in an area, you're in a place where you don't speak the language, you don't have a car, you're going to the grocery store and all of the signage is not in the language that you grew up in, and you're living out of, a couple suitcases, and you end up at an apartment and do all of that. You're accelerating that life together. You're learning how each other solve problems. You're learning how to solve problems as one rather than as 2 individuals. But then also, it's the quality of the reps, but then, it's the rep count, right? It's one of those where, I love the 10,000 hour concept because it does set, more reasonable expectation on the idea of mastery, right? It isn't something where, you can't become a master of anything in 100 hours or in, 1 year of doing something for an hour a day or something like that. It's one where it's like, it's shots on goals, it's doing your free throws, it's doing your reps at the gym. And it's really just honing in those skills where over time, a rep with the bar early on is all you can do, but then you work up and weight, and then a rep, today may look different. It may carry a different weight or anything like that, but it's doing the same kind of progressive overload, to use a, more physical fitness model.
Love it. Yeah. And one of the reasons that we've had a little bit of success is my wife and I started, when we got married, we moved to Midland and just said, hey, we want to do life together. And we started buying businesses together and real estate together and investing together. And so we spent instead of just like goofing off, going on vacation for every weekend traveling, we spent every weekend working together. And so we got a lot of reps doing things that were pretty high stress very quickly in our marriage. And it's helped us to be able to take on a lot of things that most folks would think were crazy. But for us, it's like, hey, we've been doing this for a long time now. And not only just like doing it, but practicing it, getting better. And one of the improvements that I just heard a podcast by Erwin McManus, who's my favorite pastor in the US. He preaches at a church called Mosaic in California. But he said, and this is something I want to practice, the period in time where his marriage started rapidly improving in stress and started becoming less stressful was the period in time when he finally said, I'm not trying to make you like me. I'm just loving you how you are. And I was like, man, that was so convicting for me, because I oftentimes am trying to like, hey, let's do personal development based on how Chris Seegers would do it. Or, hey, you should have these habits, or you should have this view for your life or this mission. And so that's something like, as we improve our marriages, I was like, that's such a good word of just being with our spouse and not trying to put them in our box, which I do on a weekly basis for sure. So, okay. So let's take this concept. So you come back, was it Slovakia, right? You came back from Slovakia, you come right back into it. you start getting into business, specifically in oil and gas, and you're very, very good at synthesizing complex data and spitting out useful answers, whether it be on the economic, financial side, or operation side, human resource side, all of them. So walk us through that a little bit, because you and I know are going to do business together in the future, because you try to make very complicated things simple, which is one of our core tenets, is like every business is simple. Like business is very simple. You've just got to get the right data and find the right answers and not overcomplicate it. So walk us through that progression a little bit about how you got into that and some of the good things you did and maybe some of the bad things you did in that journey.
Yeah, no, I think it's one of those where, I think the context here is I'm a fairly intellectually, I don't like to do the hard thing. I appreciate doing the hard thing. And so, my greatest strength and my greatest weakness, I think, might be some semblance of laziness. I think it's, over stigmatized, and it probably isn't the right word, but, this idea where, work smart, not hard, that dynamic. And so, bringing that into an industry that is, just latent with, disparate data systems and disparate Excel spreadsheets and disparate, processes to run a company, especially ones that are, as lucrative as oil and gas. There's a lot of low hanging fruit to just go in and say, hey, there's data that we, look at here, whether it be production data from our wells, or it be public data that's hosted somewhere else, or it be operations data, or like you said, financial data or engineering data with forecasts, and bringing all that together to create, value for the company you're working for. And really that value comes in the shape of a couple of things. Sometimes you're able to, because of the data that you've pulled together and the analytics you've done, maybe you're able to do something cheaper. Maybe you're able to do something more accurate. Maybe you're able to do something better and create value that you couldn't have otherwise done. But one thing also that I found out, in the data and analytics space, is it's not just a technical endeavor, right? Early on, I thought, it's ones and zeros, it's computer screens, it's, you're doing work with coding and R and Python and all the fun stuff. And it is technical, but really the value
that doesn't sound fun to me, Joseph.
No,
I don't even know what those are, but it doesn't sound fun.
The value I found, and, with talking to you and to other people, especially out in Midland and then now in Austin, you learn that, the kind of loop that closes on data and analytics is the idea of storytelling. And it's this idea that your data has a story, and it really, you have to connect the data and the purpose of that data to the value of whatever you're trying to create for and solve for. And so really honing in that soft skill of data storytelling has been really one that, I've seen a lot of value in, because you're dealing with people who, don't have the capacity, technically or with their time, to go through, the minutia of the technical. And so it's one of those where, they want to hear the impact. They want to hear the bottom line of what the data is telling them. And then if they want to double click into how we got there, that whole breadcrumb trail is there, for us to kind of go in and audit, the process or the decision that you make.
I love that. And we use EOS in all of our businesses, and we've taken all our data across all the platforms and synthesized them into scorecards. And I'm a strategic advisor and a partner in an oil and gas company called Rockport, which is going to be one of the #1 independent oil and gas upstream development companies in the US. It's going to happen. We have the right team, we have the right assets, we have the right culture and curriculum. But one of the things we're working on that has been a total shift is right now we're doing operational, financial, et cetera, scorecards, but we're also building out impact scorecards, which is something we had been doing in our family office and we're starting to do there. And so when we talk about lead and lag measures in a scorecard, so the lag measure is the outcome, like what you want, right? So, hey, we want to grow revenue by X percentage. That's a lag measure. The lead measures are the daily activities. And so when it comes to operational and financial, it's actually a lot easier to split that up. But then we started saying, how do we do this for impact? If one of our core tenets is to advance human flourishing through hydrocarbons, we're like, okay, well, what does that really mean? We create a great product. We're already doing that, but we also give a lot of money away. We're serving in different capacities. So, but we want to improve that. We don't want to just say, hey, we gave this amount of money away last year. That's great. We want to say, hey, as we grow as a company, and we could have our team flourish, our investors flourish, our community flourish, our team members' families flourish. How do we measure that? And my partner, Ted, I think is actually brilliant in this. One of the things as we started thinking about advancing human flourishing is our team members. And one of the main things to help them flourish is improving their quality of life with their family, giving them time, making sure we're not workaholics, and then also their physical fitness. So he's rolled out this health tracking where we're doing kind of analytics on blood work for any of the employees that want to, but also creating this platform around working out where they hopefully are, and we're kind of tracking against each other. So now we've got this impact scorecard that's not just the hard, hey, our profit margin went up, we returned more capital to our investors, we drilled better wells. Now it's like, all right, we've got this advanced human flourishing lens that we're building, and it's not real complicated. It's kind of 4 or 5 different things that we're tracking. But every year we track that, it's getting better and better where we're like, oh, actually, the data that we should be monitoring is this. So why aren't we? Okay, that's the lead measure over here. So I love that. So what are some other applications, either personally or professionally, where you've taken complex analytics and you can use the second brain or some other, analogy or thing that you're utilizing to demonstrate it? Because I think this is really critical.
Yeah, it's a cool thing. Just on the impact side, it's something our industry is done poorly, I think, in the past. Of really kind of taking that next step and marketing ourselves as impact for human flourishing. And so I think it's something that I think is a worthwhile kind of focus for companies in our space. And that's been great. On the impact side, I think you've got a mental model of the pillars for life. I've got kind of my own idea too of kind of the good life sectors, right, where you've got 8 different parts of your life. And really the kind of impetus of this is what gets measured gets managed, right? And so it's this idea of how do you create these leading and lagging indicators, right, in all of your parts of your life so that you can have a balance.
So give us some example, Joseph, for our listeners that haven't really heard about this concept of the different core areas of your life. Give us some concrete examples of those areas and maybe some of those lead lag measures.
Yeah. So there's 8 of them that I kind of go through, whether, it's in the morning and I'm grading myself at the end of the day or something like that. And, the helpful piece here is a lot of people have 2 sectors, right? They have work and they have life, right? And the hard part with that is, work is almost graded for you if you're a W-2 employee. You have, a lot of that validation that's given to you. But then you have life, right? And then, life consists of everything outside of work. And so the pitfall of having that mental model, at least for me, was that I was able to pick something outside of work, whether it be my health or, going on vacation or, my finances or something like that, and saying, hey, man, I'm killing it on this thing. And then having these other pieces of my life that are suffering and not being managed or measured. And so, the 8 that I think about, and they kind of fit into quadrants, but you have physical and mental life, right? And so, your health, your physical life is going to be your diet, exercise, sleep, supplementation, that kind of deal. And then there's overlap between the two. You and I have talked about stacked kind of behaviors too, where we could try to stack as many of these as possible into our schedule.
Let's pause there because that's really critical. And then let's keep going.
Yeah.
So one thing that I've said is I'm trying to get 7 points of value with everything I do. And I don't know why the 7 number, maybe it's God's perfect number. Anyways, I just came up with a number. Yeah. And so the point is like, as we're trying to integrate these different emphasis or core areas of our life, our faith, family, fitness, finances, and Joseph has different language around that, I'm trying to stack those. And so one of the ways that I've said, hey, we can compress time is saying, okay, for example, our kids were doing soccer practice late at night on Fridays. It was kind of a beatdown. Then we had to get home, get them fed. And I was like, okay, what if we stacked our small group with people that we're already doing soccer practice with at our house, doing social, with our kids, doing family? Like, how can we get 7 points of value where we're using the same time more efficiently to integrate those pieces of life? So Joseph, let's go back to the core areas of life again, but give me an example of some areas that you're thinking, because people are always like, I don't have enough time. How are some of the ways you've integrated and said, I'm getting more points of value from the same minute of time than other people?
Yeah. So just to go through the 8, just so that we've got, that we know what we're working with. You've got physical, mental, work, financial, social, family, right? Those are different, and I think they should be different. And then you've got leisure and spiritual, right? And in the mental model that I have is that all of them are meant to serve each other, right? So your physical life serves your mental life, it serves your family life, it serves your spiritual life. Your spiritual life serves your physical life. It creates meaning for the other 7, right? And so it's this idea that instead of, one existing and taking from the others, you almost have this servant sector mentality where all of them exist to serve the others, right? And it's this kind of internal community idea. And so with that mental model, you have this idea of stacked sectors. So, the idea is like, okay, we're going to go out to eat tonight because, we don't want to cook, we don't want to clean up, everybody's cooked from the day, all of that. Let's call up our friends, let's get a list together and let's try to stack, social in with family, in with maybe like leisure, right? Eating out or something like that, like throwing a party or something. Or, it could be something like, stacking physical with social, right? Going on a walk with somebody, having a conversation that you're going to already have with them, but then integrating some other piece that's going to be helpful and valuable in the other piece, right? And maybe, going to church and that's stacking, your spiritual life with your social life, with your family life. And then, you can add on to other things and you're just creating richer moments. And you're allowing yourself that, I feel like I'm not doing enough with my time if I'm just doing one thing, right? That's, the points of value, it's the value proposition of your minute or your hour or your day. It's saying, hey, can we somehow design this bit of time that we have so that we are serving, all of these parts of our lives holistically in a more balanced and meaningful way.
I love that. And I would differentiate too, like it's really critical not to multitask. This is not multitasking. So people don't think, hey, this is trying to do 5 things at the same time. It's doing similar things that you're integrating them. So it is like, if you're going to eat with somebody and you're already going to be social, what if you had a list of questions that took your conversation from kind of BS, like, hey, what happened this weekend in football or whatever, to, hey, what are 3 to 5 goals that you have over the next 3 years? Or like, how are you thinking about parenting? Here's something we're struggling with. And so it's really just, and your example was great. Like my partners who are my brothers in some of my businesses, now we're doing our walks where we're doing our L10, our level 10, our EOS meeting, but we're walking. Yep. And so, and if we need to like record some notes, we'll record them on the phone and then, email them to each other. But it's like, now we're getting some exercise, our physiology is changing, so our ideas are better, and we're still having the same meeting, but we're doing it kind of in a social setting with exercise, et cetera. Okay. So I want to transition because, we've both kind of understood that God has created an architecture to life, and there's truths to it that no matter who you are, there's different language around it to synthesize it. We use the architecture of life as kind of that. And we have done blueprinting. So the blueprint for an exceptional life, the blueprint for exceptional wealth, the blueprint for exceptional business. But one thing that you've utilized that actually really helped me start organizing my ideas just about life and seeing the patterns was a concept that you called the second brain. And I had a Google sheet that I called my life plan. It was the Chris Seeger's life plan. I still utilize it to this day. It's got too many tabs, but you've done a more consistent, like deliberate, organized framework that you call the second brain. Talk to our guests a little bit about that. And it's really saying, if we want to have 7 points of value, if we want to be more efficient, we've got to synthesize all this data and make it simple to make quick decisions around different things. So talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So, I think the idea of the second brain first came up with by Tiago Forte. So that it's important that we attribute that. But, the idea there is, okay, I think in terms of systems, I build out data systems with data sources. And then, I have this, this limited amount of RAM in our head, right? And this need to offload data to something else so that I don't have to sit there and churn with that data just sitting there on my head. And so one thing that I created using a tool called Notion. And it really is like, it's as simple as like just a little bit more structured version of Excel, with the ability to build out documents. And, I know people use it for SOPs and it's searchable, but the idea there is let's create a databases of just these different parts of our life, whether it be the people that we spend time with, the things we do, and then the things we spend our time on. So that was kind of the building blocks of this whole idea. Was you've got a piece of time that we put into a calendar, and then you've got tasks that you have to do, and then you have people that you spend time with. And so for me, it was always like, hey, let's put this all in memory, let's keep it upstairs, and let's just try to like white knuckle the idea there. But life got more complicated. I got married. So then, the amount of people that I knew 10x'd, it didn't double because my wife is a social butterfly and, I'm not as much. And so, but then the to-dos went up, the calendar got more complicated, and now we've got a 2-year-old. And so that's even gotten more complicated. And, we've lived in, 3 or 4 or 5 different places. And so then, that gets more complicated. And so we have this idea of a personal CRM in our family, right? So if we meet someone, and this could be anybody, but if we go to a conference, if we meet someone new at Bible study, if we meet someone new at church, it goes into our CRM. And I've got an inbox and then kind of like deeper vault structure. So it's like you've got high level information of just like quick capture kind of dynamic. And then you've got like deep, rich kind of data. What's cool about Notion is they allow you to take these databases and then you can combine them together and you can reference the other databases. And so we actually have our entire calendar in Notion, right? So all of our events, we've got a database of things that we spend our time on. And then, they're tagged with either myself, my wife, or a family event, right? That thing can be color coded and all of that. But then what's really cool about it is that we can then go in and we can hang tags of the people that we're going to go in and do that. And what's really cool about that is that it's two-way. It's a two-way kind of sync. And so if I wanted to look at the calendar and I wanted to just filter out for, all of the events I've ever, that I have this month, I can see those and I can see the people that I'm doing it with. But what's really cool is I can go in to my Chris Seegers, profile, and I can see all of the events I've ever done with Chris Seegers, whether it be, men's retreats or coffees or podcasts or our times in Colorado Springs where our families have spent time together, and it really does allow us to love and serve people well.
Yep, for sure. And that's what I love about your concept is it's another play on stewardship. You and I mean, you've talked about kind of stewardship of time, of, impact, et cetera. This is another point of saying, I care enough about you as a human being to put in a system so that I can organize how I interact with you and serve you better. And, not that you want to serve less without the system, but you're just less effective. And a great example of how this would be useful in my life is I've got terrible memory. So like for business deals, I could tell you every single stat, every single thing about every deal we've ever done for the past 12, 15 years. But when it comes to, people always ask me this because I meet a ton of people and I love people. And my wife and I are just connectors. So we're always meeting people. We have people to our house. We go to church. We go to small group. We go to these events. We do all this stuff. And then somebody will be like, hey, how did you meet Joseph Thompson? You're a bad example because we had a very memorable meeting, but somebody here in Colorado. And I'm like, you know what? I have no idea. And then that person is kind of like, maybe feels a little bad that like, I don't care enough. And it's not because I don't care enough. It's just, people come into I'm like, I embrace them into my family and we move on. I don't really care as much, but it's important, that connection point to somebody to be like, oh, we actually met at this citywide dinner and we were talking about impact. And then you texted me and then we did this and then we went to this other thing. And so if all that data was collected in the second brain, it'd be easier for me when I know I'm going to go meet that person and say, oh man, I met Joseph at Junction in June and, we went out on the kayaks and then we've talked to each other every month for the past 7 years. I know his son's name, his wife's name. I know, but like all these things. And I've been capturing a lot of that in notes, but it doesn't communicate with everything else, right? Like I really make an effort anywhere we go, whether it be the gym. I want to know everybody that's at the gym, checking me in, the folks working out, et cetera. When you go to a restaurant consistently, I'm like, I want to know that waiter, waitress's, hostess name, learn something about it. So I love that, man. So what are some of the real, like if somebody thinks about building this out for their life or their business, because organizing your personal stuff and your business stuff into one place is really critical. How would somebody think about starting in this project? Because it seems overwhelming to me, even just to get started. Like, how would you approach that?
Yeah, no, I think you've got to pick the things that your RAM is spending a lot of time on, right? And so that's, another point about the idea of the second brain is that it allows this one, the one that I have and I carry around with me, the ability to be present. Like my brain isn't sitting there trying to remember, so-and-so's name who served me last Friday at the restaurant, because it's sitting there and I may not remember it with this brain, but I can look it up pretty quickly. And so I would just say, if you're sitting there and you're churning on things, whether it's, if it's business ideas, if it's CRM, or if it's, I've listened to a lot of your podcasts, if it's something like, hey, here's a list of business ideas or a list of company ideas that I would want to go and get into acquisition, or the people that I want to know. And instead of writing that down on a notepad, right, where it's not searchable, it sometimes isn't always with you or anything like that. It's just it's a good starting point to sit there and just say, whatever is on my brain, whatever is clogging up the RAM that's allowing me to be present and be effective where my feet are at, it's okay. Let's start to build out databases and structured data around those things, right? And so I've got databases on, the 8 parts of life. I can then go in and I can tag with people, right? I can go and tag people who I think are experts at their physical life, who are experts at their mental life, who are experts at their family lives or their spiritual lives. And it allows me to really kind of go in. I can go in and click on, leisure life or financial life or something like that. And I can see a list of experts that I know, so that if I come into a problem, I'm able to do that. And that's just another example of that kind of tagged approach to data. And then I'm tagging my events, right? I'm keeping myself accountable on how I'm spending my time to make sure that they are stacked events. Like I love being able to go in and say, yeah, this dinner is social, we talked financial, we talked spiritual, we talked physical, and there's this list, and I was there with my family, and we really kind of had a holistic kind of balanced view. And so, to answer the question, I would say, look, what are the 5 things that you're just sitting there rattling on? Is it a list of people? Is it a list of places? Like it could be your bucket list where you sit there and, you've got your dream. Or is it, you're in the middle of a construction project and you just have all these ideas about, the way you want your closet to look, or you want your kitchen or whatever. Just put those down, offload them to something else, and then just let the web start to build itself. You've got to start in one place, build that out, and then allow that to start to connect to different things.
I love it, man. And one of the tools that we built for our team and for our companies is called the Tribe Tracker. Because of this, we said, all right, if all the stats say you're the sum of the 7 to 10 people around you, well, how are we tracking that? And actually like delineating why these people should be around us. Because we want folks around us that are integrated life people, like great faith, great family lives and marriages, are exceptional at business or work, whatever they're in. And how do we track that? And so we built this Tribe Tracker to basically put you at the universe and say, all right, now we're tracking this. Well, it's difficult because there's folks like you that I'd love to hang out with every week, and we live in different cities. But now we've got this Tribe Tracker, and then I actually got a personal CRM after kind of listening to what you were doing. And now it can ping me, so I can set, hey, I want to make sure that I'm talking to Joseph minimum once a month. I'd like to do it more often. Some people I'm like, just once a year, I need to chat with them. It's a banker, and I just need to make sure I'm staying in touch with them. Some people once a week, once a day, whatever it might be. And then you can build this tribe around yourselves and start really pouring into them and knowing how to pour into them, how to pray for them, how to encourage them, what resources do they need, what resources can they bring, et cetera. I love that, man. And I think that's like a really great place to start.
Do you like what you hear so far? Make sure you never miss an episode by clicking the subscribe button now and check out our website, www.excoadvisors.com. This podcast is made possible by listeners like you. Thank you for your support. Now, back to the show.
Okay, we're getting kind of towards the end of the podcast. So let's talk about lessons, like top lessons from 2024, top resources, top things that God put on your heart, or for this coming year. Hey, I think these are the things I'm really going to focus on. What are some things that have been high value to you that you could share with our listeners and viewers?
The biggest thing that I've been working on over the last 12 months is lessening my perfectionism, right? And then there's several mental models around this, but some of the more kind of salient mental models that are really helpful for me, because I've got to logic it to its nth degree for me to really grab hold of it and it makes sense in my mind, is this idea of volume for volume's sake, really. And it's this idea that shots on goal, that the reps matter, that, they're not useless. If the work product sucks or is crappy at the end of that rep, that's okay. It's part of the process to do that. And, a helpful story, I think it was maybe Alex Hormozy or one of these guys kind of threw out there, is this idea where you imagine, an art class, and you've got, you split the art class in half, and, this is a pottery class, and half the class is asked to make the perfect pot. And that's their project for the whole semester. They're to go and read about pots and study pots and the history of pots and the different types of pots. But the final project is to come up with the perfect pot, right? And then the other half of the class is directed, their project and their score, their grade is based on how many pots that they do, right? And so more pots is better. And then the perfect pot is better for the other side. And so what you get, and, it's a hypothetical story, but, what you probably get in that situation is that even the 10th pot that's made by the people that are, just putting shots on goal, where volume is the goal, right? That's the aim. Their 10th pot is better than, the perfect pot on the other half of the class. And it's probably not even where they stopped, right? If they do a pot a day, they're, close to 100 pots in a semester. And it's one of those where it's your 100th shot on goal is by definition, no matter how much preparation, no matter how much study, no matter how much you've modeled it out in Excel, or, and this relates to anything, whether it's a real estate deal, whether it's buying a business, whether it's running a business, whether it's your professional life or a conversation with your wife or a hard conversation that you need to have with someone in your life. Just do it, do the thing. And, don't judge yourself based on the outcome of that thing, right? We still want to be, hold our standard at excellence, and we want to do things excellently. But, at the end of the day, the volume is what creates the capability. It isn't, and I think you hold these two things in tension, right? It's preparation's important, but volume is also important. And I think if you had to do one without the other, all I'm saying is I've learned over the last 12 months that probably volume is more important than preparation, because it's the act of the volume that ends up preparing you to do that thing better. There's clarity in the volume as well, that you just don't know what you don't know until you start doing, right?
Yeah, for sure. We had a phrase we used for a long time that I still use, which is bias to action. You have an idea, go put it into play. Yeah. And our team knows that when they come and they're like, hey, Chris, what if we tried this different thing on marketing? Or, hey, what if we approach this differently? I'm like, sweet, go put it to play right now and tell me tomorrow how it worked out. Yeah. And go do it 100 times. I mean, the folks, so we bought an insurance company. The folks that come in on the sales side, I'm like, look, make as many calls as you can on the front end, because you're just going to refine your sales pitch.
That's right.
So if you're making 50 calls and someone else is making 100 calls a day, they're going to get twice as much experience. They're going to get that 10,000 hours in half the time. And it's every single piece of it. When we have an idea in business, we just try it. It's hey, we, 10 years ago, hey, or 12 years ago, hey, we want to buy a business. All right, let's go buy a business. And then now it's we own 9 businesses. We'll probably own 50 by the time we die. And we're not any smarter than anybody else. We don't have any secret sauce. We just said, hey, let's try it. Let's buy another one. Let's buy another one. Let's buy a different kind of business. Let's refine our processes for how we buy it. When folks ask me about buying businesses, I'm like, go pull every online listing across the nation and start doing high level due diligence, just reviewing them, look at the economics, look at, hey, are they asset heavy, not asset heavy, what industry niches? And then pretty soon you get a gut, right? And that's the whole thing about trusting your gut. Only trust your gut if you've had a lot of repetitions in that space.
That's right.
Because pretty soon your integrated body, mind, soul starts synthesizing data and telling you things that you can't quite tell why. But you're like, this doesn't feel right. Well, it's because you've looked at it 10,000 times and you know there's something wrong with the equation. You just can't quite formulate the reason. And so if you look at more and more deals and you're like, oh, I like this. Hey, profit margin should be higher here. This should be this is listed too high. That, all of a sudden it's like the folks that really do volume. In my book, Selling Main Street, I tell a story. I coached two different buyers. Two folks, both had capital, both were smart, both had the right processes, both wanted to buy a business. The one person who was an engineer, he just was like analyzing every single thing. Oh, what does my LOI need to look like? And is this right? And is it the proper language? And blah, blah, blah. The other person who was a female was just like, I would say, hey, just submit offers. Here's a template. And she, boom, 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 boom. She got a business under contract and he's still looking for a business. Yeah. Now she's owned that business for almost 3 years and is making a pile of money and is looking to buy other businesses. Same competency. Like those same people could have been successful. The only difference was that bias to action and just seeing a lot more and putting it into play. So I love that, man. What else? What are the other things that you're really kind of chewing on either from last year or this year? Or resources or books?
No, just another kind of hedge on the idea of kind of bias to action or shots on goal is the mental model. I think it's Jeff Bezos. Yeah, he has this mental model of, you've got reversible actions and irreversible actions, and most of your actions are reversible, right? And there's a spectrum. Buying a business is it's reversible, but it's, it's not as reversible as, other things might be, like picking your outfit for the day or whatever. Yeah. And so
picking your spouse, right? Like the most important decision of your life.
Yeah. And so that's one where it's like, there may be some degree of shots on goal, but really there's a nuanced kind of degree of discernment in kind of preloading on the front end of the decision, a lot of due diligence, a lot of preparation, a lot of that kind of deal on your irreversible actions. And then, bias towards action on the irreversible ones. It's the shots on goal that matter. And that's where you're going to do it. One thing I'm really, really excited about.
Could I add one more lens real quick before we transition? Because I believe that 100%. So reversible actions shouldn't take a lot of time. Non-reversible should take more time. The other lens that you and I have talked a lot about is moral and non-moral decisions.
Yeah.
So if you're a person of faith, I see believers all the time that get so caught up in non-moral decisions. Yep. Where they're like, I'm going to pray about where my kids go to school. And it's like, you should absolutely pray and you should get good counsel, but then you should do an action. Now, if it's, hey, I'm thinking about doing something amoral, it's like, no, you can't come back from that, right? Like if you go down the road and, cheat on your wife or do something terrible, like, yeah, that's something that you should have, taken more time. But those moral, amoral, it's like with a non-moral decision for believers, I think it's like, yeah, you should pray on it, get wisdom and go. Yep. The ones that you're like, man, this could really change my life in a good or bad way. And it is kind of a morality gray area where I'm like, I really need to pray over and get insight from God, from the people around me. So anyways, I think those are really good lenses as you think about biased action to make sure you're only taking that lens in the areas that it would be healthy. Joseph, you were about to go into something else, maybe a resource or something that's been useful to you.
Yeah, I mean, I think, the Bible as a book, I think is, not just a ethereal text, an ancient text, it's not even just a living word, but it's also a practical word, right? I think in today's world, you have people even bias away from like, oh, the Bible's not a textbook, but it is practical, right? Especially go in and read the Proverbs and stuff like that on how to read it or run a business and do that thing. So I think, you've had other guests on the show recommend reading the Bible because it really is like, if you want to understand how to optimize your physical life, how you want to optimize your mental life, if you want to optimize your work life, your family life, your social life, like the Bible, God has something to say about those parts of your life. And really like the punchline, which you mentioned earlier, is the idea of stewardship. Like we are all stewarding our physical assets, our mental assets, our familial assets, our social assets, our financial assets, our spiritual assets, right? All of it is an act that it's not ours, right? Recently, I think it was even this week I've been thinking about the word resource, right? And it's this idea where, it's meaning like reuse, recycle, whatever, but then you've got source. And like by definition, the word is like stewardship. It's like, it's not yours, it's not the source, but it's yours to go and, be a grace to others, through that. So I think that's a piece. One thing I'm really, really excited about over the next, and we'll see kind of how this plays out. It's a changing world, and we're doing this podcast, at the end of February, but I'm really excited about the landscape and what that looks like for business and for personal life and stuff like that. I mean, I think there's some hesitation and stuff like that. I think that's important as well, to take technology and put it through the proper lens. But I think there's going to be applications where you really do, just like the kind of the good life sectors, or the second brain are all like kind of technological mental models. I think AI has the ability to go in and make the time that you spend more efficient, right? It'll be a further offloading potentially of some of the route kind of administrative tasks that we do as humans to serve people well. And I think, harnessed in the right way, I think we'll be able to serve people better in our social lives. I think it'll help our physical lives. You mentioned blood tests and stuff like that. I think that space is really interesting. And so just from a data lens, I think the whole AI world and some of the applications that are coming out of it are, at least interesting.
Yeah, I'll give a specific area that's really interesting to me. So in the like proactive health space, right, we have a lot of folks our age and older, younger, et cetera, that are like, hey, I don't want to treat a symptom. I want to know what I need to do to have a healthy body. And one of our really dear friends went through a struggle where it was like physical issues, mental issues, health issues with her and her kids and her family. Couldn't figure it out. Finally, they figured out it was mold. And so like that data set is not prevalent. Like you don't go to a doctor and they're like, we're going to test you for these genetic tracers and markers and also for mold and also for this and also for gluten. Like there's not just a good synthesis of all the things that are you as a human that can say like, whoa, here's this really weird red flag. Like we need to look into that. In fact, one of my friends who was at the oil and gas conference you and I were at gave me the same story. He's like, yeah, we didn't know why we were sick for 2 years. And then finally but it's a specialist doctor that only knows about this type of mold, that knew we had to treat it these different ways, that all of our family thinks we're crazy because we're doing these different things than just traditional medicine. Mm-hmm. And so like, as we can get all that data set together and say, all right, now we've got one thing that tests all the things, then people with sleep issues, my brother struggled with sleep issues forever. He's tried diet things and all kinds of different things, and he still can't figure out what's the core problem, what's the block, what's keeping him from being able to sleep. So anyways, I love that. What about, let's close here. Any parting wisdom or things that you think folks could potentially put energy or focus on for 2025?
Yeah, I mean, I would say start a second brain. I would say offload your RAM, be more present. I think that's a desire that all of us have, but the idea is like, how do you practically do that? And at least for me, that's one way that I've practically found the ability to be more present and less in my own head. I know my wife has appreciated the second brain in that way, and then not as appreciated it in other ways, right? Because you're pushing a process onto a family and doing that kind of deal. And then put more shots on goal. I think, if you're thinking about doing something and it's amoral,
it's
and
moral.
If it's amoral, meaning, it doesn't have a moral consequence and it's reversible or semi-reversible, go and do it. Like, get out there, make the call, do the bid, ask the girl on the date or the guy on the date, like, do the thing, get shots on goal, go live life.
I love it, man. I love it. Joseph, I love you, brother. You're such a dear friend. Thanks for sharing all the wisdom and taking time. And I'll have you on again and we'll do this down the road. Appreciate you, brother.
Love it, man. Appreciate you.
Thanks for joining us this week on the Exceptional Companies Podcast. Make sure to subscribe to the show on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, or via RSS so you'll never miss a show. While you're at it, if you found value in this show, we'd appreciate a rating on iTunes, or if you'd simply tell a friend about the show, that would help us out too. If you liked this show, please reach out through our website, www.excoadvisors.com, for free tools to order a copy of Selling Main Street, or to sign up for our free webinar on how to sell your Main Street business.